Hey, how's it going? I made I made the same mistake with Twitch I made last time. I put race war in the title and it's telling me I can't have any title with race war in it. So okay, so it's fixed. Hopefully this will be a short one, but we were talking about bell hooks last time, and one of the things that came up was Audre Lorde and the whole thing about the master's tool can't dismantle the master's house. And we didn't get to talk about it too long because it was going long enough already. But I think it's a very interesting thing to actually read because uh, something I find really, really, really fascinating is that a lot of people don't seem to have read the article, even intellectuals. I'm gonna give you an example, and I'm going to try to really hit the ground running and just go right through it because I did not like how long it went last time. But people say it all the time on Twitter and in different things. There was a show called The Chair, and Sandra O's professor character puts it on a blackboard, and it's like the most brain dead, make no sense phrase ever. And people always use it. And when people use it, I always challenge them on, you know, what it means. People only seem to use it when it's something that they don't like, but they don't actually but they don't want to actually take the time to argue about why you're wrong in a logical way, so they try to use the clever phrase. So what they say is, like, you'll be like, oh, we need to build a strong family unit, and someone will be like, oh, the master's tools want those dismantle the master's house or whatever, and it's just a way of saying you're not doing what I would do, and I don't like that, but I don't really want to actually sit down. And so, like, one thing is to appeal to authority. They want to appeal to an authority, but the problem is they're assuming their authority is your authority. Like, I don't care if you say that Audre Lorde said something. Like, who is she? She's not like a scientist or something. It's not like deferring to Einstein on physics. She's just a lady who had some thoughts. You know what I mean? The stuff is so subjective. It's like she's not a database person, so it's like, yeah, she said it. Like, so what? She's not, but whatever. But on top of that, I always point out that it makes no sense. Like, I'll be like, why you're a PhD student, like the person saying it to me, why are you not chasing the master's tools? Or I look at your timeline and you spend all your time tweeting about Oscars so white. So isn't an Oscar like the master's tool? Isn't the award ceremony, isn't Hollywood? And they always say this stuff and they can never really push back. They just get mad or block me or whatever. And I'm like, these questions are so basic that you would think they'd have an answer to it. Like if you challenge a Marxist on certain stuff, a well-read Marxist will have a whole bunch of things they can cite that already tackle this issue. It's a very well thought out paradigm. Even if you agree or disagree with it, they at least are used to defending their position. But a problem with these people is that they're used to insulating themselves from any, because they live in a world where they want to create affirmation and validation bubbles. Uh, a problem with them is that, and all they want to do is block people who don't agree with them or whatever, or just lecture people that they have to read the books that they like, as if the books that they like are going to convert everybody, like the Bible. It's a kind of religious cult. They aren't very good at defending their positions because they just want to kind of victim bully people into going along with them, and then if you don't go along with them, they accuse you of gaslighting, and gaslighting to them just means you didn't affirm me. That's basically, that's not the real definition of gaslight, but in those circles, that is the definition of gaslight, right? So they always say this master's tool thing, it doesn't make sense, and I asked them about it, they don't make sense, and I started thinking I should read the article because surely Audre Lorde, as the genius that we're constantly told she is, maybe I have to see her run through the dialectic. Maybe I have to see her lay down the groundwork. And if I see her do it, maybe it'll be like reading Fanon or reading Kwame Ture or reading, um, a philosopher like Plato or Heidegger, where you get to watch them, work out and untie the logical knot, or lay down the groundwork. So I thought that the essay, "The Master's Tools Can't Dismaster Can't Dismantle the Master's House," we're going to lay down her examples and counter examples and exactly how she comes to it. And then from that, now I know what I'm arguing against. Because for whatever reason, the people who keep using this phrase on me, they can't elaborate what the phrase means. So I can't get a good discussion from them because I'm not just disagreeing or debating just to disagree. I actually want to get to the truth and I want to understand their logic because maybe they'll convince me. There's a lot of times where I've had someone say something that makes no sense to me and I challenge them on it, and then they come back and resolve the seeming contradictions in a way that satisfies me to the point that I'm like, you know what? I didn't see it that way, but you convinced me. And I've changed my mind like that. And yeah, this is very true. They assume that their views are hegemonic and universal. That's very yeah, they don't think that they should have to argue. You're exactly right, M. Tucson. I don't recall seeing you all the time, but I do understand. I do like what you're saying, and I really like this comment. So thank you. Thank you. You should definitely be around here more often because that's a great, great, great point. Um I don't know what you're saying here. Martha Gooch. I'm just trying to read it. Sorry. Not discussion. I don't sorry, I don't understand what you're trying to say here too. Um Maybe if you can like rephrase it. Yeah, I mean, that's not what gaslighting is. But I'm saying that's what they make gaslighting into. Like the same way they use the word violence. Like whenever you disagree with them, they call it violence. But that's not what violence is. First off, violence doesn't have to be physical. Violence can be emotional, it can be intellectual, but it's definitely not just disagreeing. So yeah, I definitely think that you're right that that's not what gaslighting is. I don't know if that's the point that you're making. If you think that I'm misusing it or you're agreeing that they're misusing it, but yeah, it gaslighting means that you're making someone doubt the evidence of their own senses and their own sanity and undermining their ability to trust themselves, their thoughts, and their senses by denying what you know to be true to them and making them doubt themselves. But to them, gaslighting just means you did not affirm me. And in a way, like, real gaslighting is a invalidation, it is a disaffirmation, but it's a very specific type of intentional, insidious, dishonest invalidation and disaffirmation. Like, for example, if you do something wrong or you say something wrong or you think something wrong, and in good faith I prove to you that you're wrong, then yeah, I've invalidated your point, or I've invalidated you to a degree, and I've disaffirmed your views, but I didn't gaslight you. I just proved that you were wrong. But yeah, to them, they can never be wrong because that's disaffirming, and showing that they're wrong is gaslighting because you can only say they're wrong with malicious intent. You can never say that they're wrong on good faith, being smarter than them. That's the reason why they always think them just giving you a reading list is the problem, because they think the only way you can possibly not agree with me is because you don't get my brilliance. Like, my brilliance and my idols and my heroes and my thoughts are so infallible that the only way you could possibly disagree with me is because you don't get it. And that my job is to actually talk at you more with the same points until you get it. Not, wait a minute, he's actually refuting me properly. So I've got to change my tactics and be flexible and cop to what he's right about and stick to what I'm right about and attack where he's wrong. Like, they don't really think in that way. They just think, wait, this person is not fawning and affirming me. There's something wrong with them. It's not, there's something wrong with my argument, and there's something wrong, it can never be that. Because the other thing is, too, they think they are their argument. So they think if something is proven to be wrong with their argument, by implication, there's something wrong with them, and that they're fighting for their very validity. That's why the affirmation and validation goes hand in hand. Affirmation is uh, reinforcement of what someone believes and thinks, um, and does, whereas validation is the support of what someone is, like their identity, like, your blackness, your whiteness, your maleness, your femaleness, like, um to be supported on the unchanging parts of you that you can't change. Like, for these people, affirmation and validation is kind of fused. It kind of happens with narcissists. Narcissists have a fusing of guilt and shame, because guilt is feeling bad about what you did or what you thought or whatever, and shame is feeling bad about what you are. And narcissists and sociopaths and those types of people and codependents and different types of personality disorders usually operate from a place of shame. Like, they think their whole being is defective. But healthy people tend to operate from a place of guilt. Like, a narcissist will be like, I said something stupid, therefore I must be stupid. Or I did this wrong, therefore my whole existence is wrong. I'm wrong. I shouldn't exist, and whatever. And when that happens, because they think that their whole unchanging self is defective, their only option to themselves is to cover up who I am, or rationalize away, or throw smoke screens, or lie, or bullshit, because you have a natural imposter syndrome. But if you have a healthy sense of guilt and not shame, what you do is, I did something stupid, but I'm not stupid. I was wrong, but I am not wrong to exist. So, like, so if I did something effed up to you, my sense of guilt will tell me, okay, I need to make it right. I need to do retribution. I need to do restitution. I need to do a good act to undo the bad act. Now, if I have a fusing of guilt and shame, and which is what they call toxic guilt, where your guilt is shot through with shame, what happens is, I'll be like, I did something wrong, therefore I'm wrong. I said something stupid, therefore my whole being is stupid. And if I wronged you, instead of just thinking, hey, I'm human, but I just did something wrong to this person, so all I gotta do is restitution, and outweigh the bad action with the right action. What they say is, okay, I did something wrong to this person. That means that I'm defective. And because I can't change the fact that I'm defective, right? I have to cover up what I did wrong, or I have to deny that I did something wrong, or I have to project on the other person and make them think that they did something wrong, or I have to, like, gaslight them or accuse them of what they're accusing me of. So basically, what kind of happens with these people is, whenever you try to prove them wrong, or even in good faith or whatever, you're just fighting for the truth. They're fighting for their lives. They're fighting for their very existence, their very self-image, their very right to exist and right to have self-respect. That's why everything is illogical with them. You can never get them to admit that they did anything wrong, no matter what, in a debate or whatever. And they will move the goalpost. They will do whatever, because they do everything to affirm and validate themselves, because they can't generate internal affirmation and validation. They can't self-affirm, they can't self-validate, which is what true self-esteem is, that you've internalized based on how your family affirmed and validated you, and your community affirmed and validated you growing up. You can now internalize, it's called introjection. You can introject those mechanisms into yourself and now do it in yourself. Like if you had a parent or mentors or friends that abused you and called you names, say they called you stupid and crap and all this stuff all your life, as an adult, your internal voice is going to be that. It's going to be, it's called introjection. You introject those outside voices into your own internal voice. That's your super ego, right? Now, if you had family that affirmed you, that told you, hey, yeah, you fucked up, but you're not fucked up. I'm disappointed in your actions, but I still love you as a person. Your actions aren't you. You're a good kid who just did something wrong or was wrong, but you can improve. Just do the right thing. My love for you is not conditional, or whatever. The people like that introject that. So they can do that to themselves. They can be easy on themselves. They can separate their views and their actions and their beliefs from their essence. And so basically, these people, for whatever reason, maybe it's trauma because they all claim to be traumatized, but they don't have that introjection that allows them to do that. So they're not able to engage in an argument just for the sake of truth seeking. Everything is a defense of their very psychic life. They're fighting psychic annihilation in the type of innocuous transactions that we kind of take for granted if we have a healthier outlook to this stuff. Yes. There's a great book about this called Mindset, by Carol Dweck, and she talks about something called a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. She doesn't really use shame and guilt, but the fixed mindset correlates to shame, and the growth mindset correlates to guilt. And if you read it, it makes a lot of sense. Um, yeah, they think they'll melt like the Wicked Witch of the West when she got hit by water when they get hit with a counter argument. Yeah, it's very very bizarre. By the way, please share it, people. Hit like, share. Let's get some people in here. But anyway, I would just be arguing with these people, and they could never. It was just a catchphrase that they thought that they would say, and it would just win every argument. So it's like, I gave the example of when they used it for Killmonger, and it made no sense. You know, um, yeah, the super ego is the critical parent, but it could also be the reassuring parent if you had that. It doesn't always have to be harsh, but unfortunately, a lot of times it is. But yeah, so these people have this attitude, and they use this phrase as this kind of thing that they just whip out, but it makes absolutely no sense. And when you apply it to them, they can never explain to you why. Because to be honest, they are so enamored with the master's tools. All they want to do is to integrate into the master's institutions, to get props from the master, to get acknowledgement from the master. They're fighting to get Joe Biden elected and doing electoralism and everything. And you see, like, you have Kimberly Crenshaw going to the mattresses for Joe Biden and trying to get think tank money and everything. But you know, she'll cite Audre Lorde, and it's like, how is this? How does this so happen that everything that the master does that you like is somehow not the master's tools? And it makes no sense, because why can't the master's tool dismantle the master's house? Like, if I'm going to take apart something that I built from IKEA, the same screwdriver and hammer and wrench and pliers that I used to put it together are the same ones they're going to do to take it out. It isn't like I put together like a piece of furniture with one set of tools, and I'm like, damn, I gotta take it apart. Damn, I don't have dismantling tools. All I have is this wrench, this screwdriver, this hammer, this leveler. You know, I'm screwed. Yeah, it's not like, and it especially makes no sense because the key word is dismantle. If she at least just said destroy the master's house, that might make a little more sense. Like, for example, the way I build a building is not the same way I destroy it. If you ever look at how they build a building, they build it with jackhammers and all this stuff. When it's time to destroy it, they just set off a giant implosion in the building and crush it. Exploding something is different than dismantling it. Dismantling it is when you actually methodically take it apart while you're trying to preserve the parts. Like, Dismantling, it means you're doing it in a way usually that if you had to, you could put it back together. If anything, nothing more than dismantling requires nothing requires the master's tools more than dismantling, because dismantling means you're just reversing everything you did and taking it apart. Like, at least at least with just destroying shit, like, which is like real rebellion. You can almost say you shouldn't use the master's tools to destroy the master's house, which is true. Like, I'm not going to waste time using hammers and screwdrivers and wrenches and pliers to to destroy something. I'll just throw a bomb in there. But if I'm going to dismantle it, that more than anything requires the master's tools. So again, makes no sense. But a lot of smart people take this at face value. One of the problems is people tend to project on other people, right? But we always think of projection as a bad thing. Like, for example, people always say projection as in, hey, you're taking this bad thing that you can't own and you're putting it on someone else. So this bad thing that you're accusing someone of is actually what you do. But there's good projection too. So a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll take their good parts and project it on other people. So what happens to a lot of people, and I used to have this problem all the time. I would engage in an argument and I would think, okay, there's no way this person was just lying. This person's an academic, they're respected, they're called an activist. Surely this person had a good faith argument. So I'm there trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I'll think, because, like, I wouldn't be in front of a national stage as an activist and a teacher and whatever and just be lying and doing climerism. So I just think other people like that decent too. And I have to learn that you have to stop doing that and think anybody can be capable of anything, and people can fool all the people all the time. Like, Abraham Lincoln said, you can fool some of the people some of the time and all the people, whatever, but you can't fool all the people all the time. But how would you know? Think about it. If someone did fool all of the people all the time, nobody would know. So, how can you say with confidence you can't fool all the people all the time? Because by the nature of pulling it off, no one will have seen it. So, everybody who fooled all the people all the time will have been undiscovered. So, I forgot what that fallacy is, when all you can see is the times when it didn't work, but you can't see the times when it did work. So you are using a flawed data set. But my theory is you probably can't fool all the people all the time. But the downside of that is that no one's going to know because you fooled all the people all the time. And that's the most dangerous thing. But anyway, back to the Audre Lorde thing. There was an article by Nathan, and also support the show. All the ways to support the show are in the ticker at the bottom. But you can also hit the super chat if you're enjoying the stream. So just pick one of the ways down there and support the show. But I want you to check this out. And this was an example of the good projection I'm talking about. Nathan Robinson is a very intellectually, to me, good faith, honest interlocutor. That doesn't mean that you have to agree with what he's saying. I'm not saying that at all. He said things that I've disagreed with, but I always feel like whether he's right or wrong to me, he's always come to his conclusion by honest engagement with the facts and honest engagement with himself. So he goes, can the master's tools destroy the master's house? I'm going to read this as a short article. Some of the master's tools should probably be seized and used as our own. And one of the problems with this is that he's kind of writing this as a way to make an argument for socialism. So he's taking the phrase and trying to make it so that he can make a case for socialism. Now, the reason why he's doing this is because a major part of socialism is seizing the means of production. So socialism has built into it using the master's tools, because you're taking what the capitalist fat pigs, or fat cats, or the capitalist pigs, whatever you want to call it, are using as the means of production and giving it to the workers. So he's taking it from the example of, okay, this is a good faith argument that Audre Lorde made. And as a socialist, I have to defend socialism against it. So because he thinks he's facing a good faith argument, he's responding with his own good faith argument. And where I think he goes wrong here is, I don't think she's serious about anything at all. And I'm going to explain why later. The key is not to argue against this good faith premise of you can't use the master's tools to undo the master's house, and argue against it with your own good counter premise. What you need to do is look at it and say, is she even telling the truth, or is it just pure bullshit? Like, is she even really arguing this? And if not, what is she really arguing? So this whole thing is kind of a pointless exercise that he's doing, because the original statement is not a serious statement, and it's not arguing what it claims to be arguing. And I'll explain why. Um so I'm going to read this whole thing because it's short. It has always been somewhat I've always been somewhat puzzled by a quotation popular among leftists. And that's kind of true. It shouldn't be popular among leftists if you are thinking, because it's an argument against seizing the means of production. But I feel like a lot of people check their brains at the door when it comes to bell hooks and Audre Lordes. And I think in a way it's a kind of a low-key racist reason, because I think when black women say something, there's this kind of assumption you're not supposed to over engage it intellectually, because what black women, like, I think leftists and liberals have their own internalization of racist beliefs, but they just manifest themselves differently. So the idea that black people aren't intellectual, but they're more in tune with nature, they're more in tune with feelings, they're more in tune with homespun primitive wisdom, or type of almost noble savageness, which comes through in the magical Negro, the person that helps the white person with using good vibes and good advice and ancient homespun country folk wisdom, Uncle Remus, whatever. These people are kind of an intellectualized version of that too. So basically, it's what I call vibes feminism. You're just supposed to, they're supposed to be the noble savages. Like, white people are just too in their heads and over intellectualized, that we need to be brought down to earth by that good old homespun, um, maternal, intuitive magic and wisdom of the mammy. I call it like neo mammyism sometimes. It's an intellectualized, refined, redeemed version, disguised version of the mammy. Um, but you don't attack it or engage it as rationally as white theorists. If you do, you're almost being racist, because you're invalidating the particular strength of the minority, which is to be the conscience, to be the soul, the that's why I say black people have soul too. I think there's something in incalculable, unquantifiable, ephemeral, metaphysical about black wisdom. It's not rationality. It's not empiricism. So if like a white guy with glasses says you can't use the master's tools to dismantle the master's house. Like, if it was like a nerdy white guy, everyone would be like looking at it with a fine-tooth comb, and would bring up all these Marxist theories and be like, hey, this is Marxism, seize the means of production. What do you mean you can't use the master's tools? This whole thing is about getting the master's tools, seizing the means of production. But even these enlightened leftists, because a black woman says something, they'll be like, whoa, wow, that's just really, and I find it kind of patronizing and condescending a lot of the time, I'll be honest. Uh, but they think it's complementary, and then sadly, a lot of black people are so built to seek out like white acceptance that they don't even realize it's insulting. They're fine being patronized like that, you know. So I think they can be open with their racism, but they can't. But they can't be as overt as right wingers. Like they have to try. Like they're accidentally open with their racism, but they don't want to be. Like it leaks through if you know what to look for. But they're not as open about their racism because if they were, so many black people wouldn't buy into the crap. You know, like it might not be the most ingenuous covering up their racism, but I do think that they are not comfortable being open with their racism. You know, um, I mean, they're avoiding criticizing her out of convenience, but where is that convenience coming from? It's a paternalistic racism. Why? I mean, they don't avoid attacking the nerdy white guy out of convenience, but it's a bigotry of it's a soft bigotry of low expectations. You know what I mean? Like, so I still think uh, that avoiding her out of criticism is part of their attempt to hide their racism in a way that ends up reinforcing it, but reinforcing it through a type of paternalism that they think or maternalism, depending on if it's coming from a feminist, that they think of as uh, anti-racist. Yeah, the level of racism that they openly engage in all depends on how good slash bad it is for the brand, but they still try to openly engage in it less than conservatives. And what else was I gonna say? I mean, a lot do, but a lot don't, but a lot of them do, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think it's undeniable that they are less comfortable with being openly racist than conservatives. Does it still leak out? Yeah, totally. And does it? And in their attempt, like this is the thing with leftists. A lot of left open racism, ironically, comes from their attempt to not look racist, but because they're racist, they can't help. It would be like somebody who have you had somebody who's just a messed up person, but they're trying not to be a messed up person, but everything they do because they have no empathy or respect for people, even when they try to help, they still end up helping in like an assholey kind of way, you know, like they'll still end up being like patronizing, like they'll come like, yeah, you know, I heard you didn't have any money and everything, and I know you're not, you know, good at getting a job and everything. So, you know, I bought you this, you know, and like they'll be like saying like insulting, patronizing things to you while they're trying to help you. You know, it's a good example is a perfect example is Everyone Hates Chris. With the white liberal teacher, she's trying really, really hard to act like she's anti-racist, and everything she's saying is racist. And I think that's what you're getting stuck on, B. Scott, in that yes, everything she's saying at the end of the day becomes as racist as what the conservative's saying. But the difference is the conservative is just saying it just to be racist and to put the black person down. The white liberal is actively trying to do the opposite, come out as racist, but because she's only working on the superficials and not changing her heart, the intent, the energy still comes through. And that's what I mean. Like, you're right that they're still openly racist liberals, but what I'm saying is that they're not comfortable being openly racist. Like that teacher, if you were to hold a mirror up to her and make it register to her that she was putting down black people, her brain would fry on Everybody Hates Chris because she thought she was doing the exact opposite. And she would fry in a way that the white conservative's brain wouldn't fry because he is fine with you thinking that he's racist. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. So I hope that's clear. Anyway, I mean, I don't think I'm over rationalizing it at all. I think that's pretty much how it is. You have to understand the differences. Like I think when I say that the liberals making overt attempts to try to not seem racist, I don't think it's over rationalizing it. I mean, I think a lot of us get so into making sure that liberals don't get any credit for being less racist than Republicans, that we kind of overcorrect. Like I think what you're hearing from me is he's trying to give liberals credit for something, and we're so used to black people doing that we just jump in to say, no, don't you dare give them any credit. But I'm not giving them credit. Like that's the thing. Like I think you're over analyzing it and seeing what I'm doing and thinking, oh, um, we got to make sure. I understand why you're doing that because a lot of people do that. They give liberals too much credit, but I don't think that what I'm describing is not a noble thing. I don't think they're actively in their heart trying to be less racist or anything, you know? So, oh, anyway, I lost my point. Oh, yeah, so here we go. Back to this. Um, yeah, so anyway, I think there's a type of paternalism or maternalism that happens where they don't really give it the full engagement that you would to something white. Because I feel like if it didn't come from Audre Lorde and they weren't buying into this cosmic or vibes feminism, they would ask for more clarification of what the term meant. Because as leftists, on the surface, it does not seem to vibe with um sees the means of production, but they don't do that. Anyway, here it goes. He goes, it originates with Audre Lorde and goes like this. The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. They may allow us to temporarily beat him at his own game, but they will never enable us to bring about genuine change. And this fact is only threatening to those women who still define the master's house as their only source of support. Now, everybody looks at this out of context. Very few people read the whole article. And I don't fully know if Nathan read the whole article, but I think even if he did, because I think he's a fairly thorough researcher, I feel like if he did, because of him projecting good faith onto the article, I don't think he was able to really see the article for what it was and gave it too much benefit of the doubt and probably projected a lot more depth on it than there actually was, which then led to this, I think, too deep for what he's responding to response. He goes, the short, catchy version is just the master's tool will never demolish the master's house. Here's why. Here's why I puzzle over it. To me, the master's tool seemed like the ideal way to demolish his house. If the master has kerosene and a lighter in his shed, his house will not be long for the world. If he's got a wrecking ball, well, there goes the house. Grab his hammer and you can bash holes in his house. Grab his pliers and you can yank off any piece of his house. In fact, it's hard to see any way in which the master's tools are limited in their ability to dismantle his house. Personally, I don't think that's dismantling. I think that's demolishing, but it's fine because people say it both ways. Audre Lorde said dismantle, but her fans on the internet say demolish. But either way, it doesn't matter. Dismantle could be screwdrivers and pliers and taking it apart while keeping the parts intact. Demolish can be the kerosene, whatever. But either way, the master's tool can dismantle or demolish. I agree with that. But I don't want to dismiss or trivialize the power of Lord's quote. But why not? Like, to me, I think it has to earn the right to be above dismissing or trivializing. But he starts off with, and I think sometimes white people are just afraid to like look racist or sexist. So they lead off with, "I can't look like I'm invalidating this," and they proceed from there in the way that I think they wouldn't with other white people. But I don't want to dismiss or trivialize the power of Lorde's quote, but I'm going to do that after, personally. There's a reason that so many people have found it compelling. And I agree, but it's not because it's saying something um, particularly deep or selfless or activist. I think it's saying something that justifies striverism, but I'll get into that later. It forces us to think about something very important: the question of whether you can get rid of a problem by using the instruments that created it in the first place. If the problem with law is lawyers, can lawyers ever fix the law? I don't agree with that analogy because lawyers aren't tools. Uh, a new book argues that effective police reform is possible because the modern notion of policing itself, the source of the problems driving the push for reform. Another parallel: an alchemist is trying to improve the field of alchemy using the tools and methods developed by alchemists. That's never going to work. If something is the source of the problem, you can't use it to solve the problem. Now, what he's describing, I think, is something slightly different in those examples. Those aren't examples of tools dismantling the master's house. There's a quote that's misattributed to Einstein. Einstein didn't actually say it, but it's actually a paraphrasing of something else that he did say. But there's a quote misattributed to Einstein that I think is true, and it says, "You cannot fix a problem on the level of awareness that created the problem." So that means that the level of thought or awareness or energy or whatever that you use to create a problem, you can't use that same level of thinking, that same attitude, that same energy to find a solution to the problem. You have to elevate and vibrate on a higher plane and a more enlightened plane. Like you have to learn to see it kind of above the chessboard or above the playing field and develop a type of meta analysis. Like the level of thinking that created capitalism, with consumption and survival and all these things. Thinking on the level of just consumption and survival and competition is not going to produce socialism. You have to go up a level in the analysis and see the whole playing field, and that's what Marx did. He saw the whole system from above and looked down on it. That's what I think he's doing, and that's a quote that makes sense. That's a quote that is easily self-explanatory in a way that um you can defend it. And I think that's what he's unwittingly talking about here. In Lorde's master analogy, perhaps it's better to not think of physical tools at all. And this is the problem. Instead of trying to find a way to retain the quote, I think people should be bold enough to say, just throw out the quote. It's dumb. But people work from the thing of, how can we do the work and the heavy lifting to keep this quote valid? That's the theorist's job. The theorist is supposed to be taking care of this. It's not our job to do the lifting for the theorist. It's like when you're trying to criticize plot holes in a movie and someone's trying to make up alternate subplots and things that probably happen off screen to excuse the plot hole. And it's like, no, like you can't write the movie for the screenwriter and just create plugs to plot holes. You know what I mean? Um, hold on. Give me a second. I just want to read some comments. I like checking in with you guys because you guys always give good feedback. Okay, so anyway, continuing on. In Lord's master analogy, perhaps it's better not to think of physical tools at all, but the master's techniques, which I think goes more toward, you can't build. Um, Actually, scratch that. If you move into the master's house and take charge of his plantation and use the various tools of control that he did, like physical violence, you have done nothing to combat the problem. which was the existence of those tools of control in the first place. Nothing is solved by becoming the thing you are trying to destroy. Now, the problem with this is it's still kind of vague. It's still inconsistent. Like how do you define becoming the thing that you're trying to destroy? These people are trying to become CEOs. They're trying to get on the boards of white feminist organizations, trying to get on the boards of nonprofits. They're trying to become deans at these schools that are supposed to be so racist and part of white supremacy. So if what you're saying is what you claim they're saying, then now you have to ask, how do you define becoming the thing you're trying to destroy? It's still a half-baked statement, and it comes from you trying to massage sense or contort logic out of something that's inherently illogical because you just don't want to be the guy to say it's illogical. You're trying to kind of have your cake and eat it too, because there are very serious practical questions raised by the master's tools phrase. Age-old questions about how change occurs and what strategies to pursue in trying to achieve it. Do you join the establishment and try to reform it from within, or do you shun it and try to tear it to pieces from without? And then it goes on, and he says nice things about Lorde. Like Lorde sensibly counsels us against an ends justifies the means philosophy by saying that means matter and need to be examined. I like the phrase because I think it's a good caution against people who are too eager to seize power in order to solve a problem. But these people are the biggest seize power people that there are. People who use this phrase. They want to take over every white industry, even for trivial things like movies and superheroes and comics and TV networks. They want to be in charge of everything. So it's like all these alternative, more sensible things that you're saying. If you're going to try to pretend that that's what Lorde is saying, then the next thing to advocate is, why did Lorde and her followers who use the phrase not apparently follow this? Like you're reading into this stuff what Lorde truly meant without then examining if that's what she truly meant. Why do all her actions and her followers' actions go against this? You know, 'Cause and he goes, I still find it deeply frustrating though, because I think it can lead to people seeing important assets as somehow too tainted to use. And I'm like, okay, well, if you find it deeply frustrating because it will keep people from pursuing the best means of change, then why do you think it's a good phrase? You say you think it's a good phrase, but I think it's in that case it's not a good phrase. So then anyway, he ends it with, that means Lord is right though. Like, so this is where it ends. Um it basically ends with, he goes, I look at it differently. I think they are in and of themselves neutral, meaning the tools, and it depends what you do with them. And so basically, it's not that the master's tools can't dismantle the master's house, but the tools are neutral, and how you use the tools matters. Okay, that's fine. But now you're saying something different than the phrase. Once you say this new definition of what you think the tools mean and what they're for, you have now said something different than the phrase. The phrase says you can't use the tools at all. You're saying you can actually use the tools. The tools are neutral, they're not inherently bad. It depends on what you do with them. But then the last paragraph says, that means Lorde is right though. But no, she's not right. Like, you can't have it both ways. You can't say the phrase is wrong and this is actually a better meaning and the meaning is something different, but then say, yeah, but she's still right. And I think that's the limit of this thing, of this need to project good faith into an argument because you yourself tend to argue with good faith. And I think that's what he's doing. And I think there's also like a fear of, I think even though a lot of people don't really buy into identity politics, it's so in the discourse and baked in that people are still, even unconsciously, acting it out. And I'll give an example. Like I see sometimes there'll be someone who's against identity politics, like say the right wingers. Right wing people always claim to be against identity politics, litigate the ideas that the person saying them. But right wingers will still use Candace Owen and people like that to say the most racist things because they realize it's also a useful tool. And hey, and then when somebody argues, like say Candace Owen, you're supporting white supremacy. If you ever notice, the right wingers always say, "Oh, but she's a black woman. Are you saying a black woman um, can be racist against black people?" And it's like you guys yourselves are the ones who always say identity of the speaker doesn't matter. The truth matters. Facts don't care about your feelings, this and that. But so yeah, I think this stuff is so baked into the ethos that and into the atmosphere, the intellectual atmosphere, that even people who normally don't even believe in it unconsciously buy into it. And I think what's kind of happens is a lot of white leftists and people who claim to be above like superficial identity politics will still think to themselves, as a white person, I shouldn't be saying this, or I shouldn't be going too hard, you know. So anyway, it goes. I think the tools in and of themselves are neutral, and it depends what you do with them. And frankly, I believe that they are actually assets to the left cause. A more powerful approach than shunning the master's tools is saying that they were never the master tools to begin with. They were ours, you know, and that's the seizing the means of production thing. That's what I think he's trying to get back to, is to bring it into. He wants to find a way to still respect Audre Lorde and, by extension, Black feminism or intersectional feminism, but still preserve the Marxist project too. And this whole exercise is him, in a good faith way, trying to reconcile what he feels is a good faith argument into something that is a synthesis. He's trying to do the antithesis to the thesis that will lead to this final two paragraphs that is the synthesis. And what I think is we should actually just question the whole idea that the original article is good faith or even makes sense, right? So yeah, the tools of science, for example, have been often been used to further violent and racist causes, such as the Nazis' development of the V2 rocket. But there's no reason that physics needs to be put to heinous ends. It is a tool that should be seasonally deployed for good. And what I'm going to say is, I think it was solid reasoning, but it came from a bad premise, right? Like I think it's a very good article in terms of the level of thought and engagement and back and forth that was in it, but the flaw of the article is not the reasoning, but the premise. If you start from a bad premise, it doesn't matter how good your reasoning is, you will end up at a bad conclusion. You know, like if I start with a premise, all cats are dogs. Once I start with that premise, I can do the most genius reasoning starting from that premise that I can. But as long as I'm starting from the premise that that is a true fact, no conclusion I come to is going to make sense. Like all my brilliant reasoning and logic is not going to work as long as I start off from the premise of all cats are dogs. And I think that's the problem. His flawed starting premise is this is a good faith article by a well-meaning person who really cared about reform and revolution and liberation, and it makes sense. And what I'm going to argue is that it doesn't make sense, and that it's not good faith, and we're going to do that now. Hold on one second. I'm going to pull up Lord's actual. So, like I was saying before, I kept trying to figure out what does this thing say for myself because I cannot get a sense of what Lord was arguing from the people who use this quote. They just seem to be using the quote, and the minute that they're questioned about it, they fold like a house of cards. They can't defend it. And I think the questions I'm asking are very basic questions. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna engage Lord myself, and see what she's saying. And this is the actual article. I read Sister Outsider. Has anyone in the chat read Sister Outsider? And I swear I came into it with an open mind and a good heart. Because what I was thinking was going into it, I didn't think that she was like a nonsense person. What I thought was she's probably a smart, well thought out person, but that these people, because they're on Twitter and Tumblr and young and kind of doing this weird social justice stuff, they're dumbing down her stuff or misguiding the points, or they're just boiling it down to greeting cards. And I was kind of shocked at how unserious and just not very well thought out the book was. The book was just vibes. It was the epitome of what I call vibes feminism. It was very poetic language. Like, I can see her value as a poet, but just nothing. The first chapter is about Russia, and it just makes no. This is ahistorical. This makes no sense. It's yeah. See, but there's a difference. It's worse than a Che T-shirt because Che was substantial, but they boiled it down to something dumb. What I'm saying is, I think they give it the level of seriousness that it originally had. Like it would be like if Che was actually the real Che was as shallow as a T-shirt. Oh, I didn't see a documentary on her when she went to Germany, but can you tell me more about it? I mean, it's the most crazy thing. It's the most crazy thing I think I've seen. This book, like I kept thinking I was getting punked. I just kept looking and looking, and I'm like, okay, this is just a bad essay. I kept going to the next one, and I just couldn't make sense out of it. But then I got to the master's tool thing, and that one really blew my mind when I saw what the actual essay was about. And I'm gonna put it up now. But before I do, I have to plug in my computer. The computer came unplugged. Give me a second. But on the screen, you're gonna see it. Hold on. Now, as I read this, keep in mind all the stuff that Nathan was saying, right? And compare it to what is actually in the original art. And you'll see what I mean when I say he was using like a hand grenade on in Anthill. Like, he put way more thought in it than he needed to do. And I think he kind of did it because the truth of what this article is, I think, was beyond his ability to imagine. Like, that he could imagine that this article was really about something as mundane as it was about. So here it goes. The master's tool will never dismantle the master's house, Audre Lorde. I agreed to take part in a New York University Institute for the Humanities conference a year ago, with the understanding that I will be commenting upon papers dealing with the role of difference within the lives of American women. Difference of race, sexuality, class, and age. The absence of these considerations weakens any feminist discussion of the personal political. And this is a very interesting piece of propaganda, this thing. I have to give it credit. I don't think it's good as an intellectual exercise in and of itself, but as sophistry, I think it's actually kind of sophisticated what she's doing here. So she says, she starts off with, I was supposed to take part in the New York NYU Institute for the Humanities conference, and I understood that I was going to be commenting about on the role of difference in the lives of American women. So her topic was going to be about differences of race, of sexuality, of class, and age. So now this has you thinking, okay, she's going to be talking about those things, about differences within American women, differences of genetics, differences of gender, differences of socioeconomic, status and whatever. But the first thing I'll point out in this paragraph, if the master's tools won't dismantle the master's house, why are you going to NYU's institute? Why is the conference not the master's tools? Like, why? That's the first thing I'll ask. But moving on, like to me, I think you should issue the academy altogether. But anyway, it is a particular academic arrogance to assume any discussion of feminist theory without examining our differences and without a significant input from poor women, black and third um, world women, and lesbians. And yet, I stand here as a black lesbian feminist, having been invited to comment within the only panel at this conference where this input of black feminists and lesbians is represented. What this says about the vision of this conference is sad. In a country where racism, sexism, and homophobia are inseparable, to read this program, meaning the program of the conference, is to assume that lesbian and black women have nothing to say about existentialism, the erotic, women's culture and silence, developing feminist theory, or heterosexuality and power. And what does it mean in personal and political terms when even the two black women who did present here were literally found at the last hour? What does it mean when the tools of racist patriarchy are used to examine the fruits of that same patriarchy? It means that only the most narrow parameters of change are possible and allowable. Now, do you guys see what's happening here? Because it's kind of subtle. And I don't want to assume that it's obvious. But she's talking about being invited to a conference and not being given enough due. The fact that her paper was about difference in race, gender, and sexuality is a smokescreen because she's not, the rest of the article is not meant, like, then go back to the first paragraph. The first paragraph talks about her going to the NYU Institute of Humanities conference and the paper she's about to discuss at the conference about difference in lives of American women, including difference of race, sexuality, class, and age. By mentioning the topic of the paper, she makes the rest of it sound deeper than it's about to be, because there's two things in that paragraph: her experience at the conference and the deep, necessary pro-black woman topic she's about to discuss. And it makes you think that of those two things, this paper is about the second, about those differences and the real systemic, deep-rooted issues that they cause in the life of black lesbian women. But that's not actually what she's talking about. It's a smokescreen, it's sophistry. What the rest of this article is actually about is what happened when she agreed to take part in the panel in the conference and what her understanding was going to be. She said, so I agreed to take part in this NYU Institute of the Humanities conference a year ago with the understanding that I was going to be doing something. And then what happened is she shows up and she feels there's not enough black women there, black lesbian women. There's and there's she's the only black lesbian feminist there. And then she was invited to comment within the only panel at this conference where the input of black feminists and lesbians is represented. So basically, what she's saying here is, I was invited only to talk in the black lesbian thing, not anything broader. I was pigeonholed and stereotyped. I was one of the only ones invited, so I was alone. I felt like um that she didn't get enough of a say. She wasn't given a central enough position at the conference. So this different stuff between sex, gender, whatever, is a smokescreen. What she's actually complaining about is that she was ghettoized into this category that she thinks she's bigger than, that there weren't enough black women there. And I don't think she really even cares about other black women. I think people like this only want more people like them in these spaces because they want to have a clique. They want to have a team. They don't want to be outnumbered by white women all the time. It's like a power play. I want to get my own in here. And also, the more space there is for other black women, the better I can do because we'd have to follow this one black person at a time rule. So it's very clever because she's using lofty terms about differences between sex, gender, and whatever to kind of hide that this is just her bitching about not getting a nice spot at the conference. But we're going to go on. The absence of any consideration of lesbian consciousness, meaning my thoughts, or the consciousness of third world women, meaning me, leaves a serious gap within this conference and within the papers presented here. So she's saying by not treating people like me better and giving us better positions, this is a workplace grievance. By not, making me more central and promoting me, this whole conference is suffering because of my shoddy treatment and me being ghettoized into this panel. For example, in a paper on material relationships between women, I was conscious of an either or model of nurturing, which totally dismissed my knowledge as a black lesbian. This is all about herself. Kind of like how all the bell hook stuff yesterday that we saw was just these people just talking about themselves all day and self-aggrandizing. She's wearing her own T-shirt, but pretending to be about community, and they're all just taking turns, competitively out humble bragging each other. So let's go on. In this paper, there was no examination of mutuality between women, no systems of shared support, no interdependence that exists between lesbian and women-identified women. Yet it is only in the patriarchal model of nurturance that women, quote, who attempt to emancipate themselves pay perhaps too high a price for the results, unquote, as this paper states. Now, what she does here is she uses a lot of, similar to bell hooks, self-help, pseudo new age woo-woo stuff to make the motive sound more noble than it is, right? So she's gonna say some stuff that sounds lofty and nice and poetic, but she's just trying to Trojan horse her own careerism in it. So she goes, and this is what I mean. For women, the need to desire to nurture each other is not pathological but redemptive. Like you get redemption. Women get redemption when they nurture each other, and it is within that knowledge that our real power is discovered. So she's saying that women need to nurture each other, and doing so is redemptive, and it pulls out our real power as women. It is this real connection which is so feared by a patriarchal world. This sounds pretty nice so far. Only within a patriarchal structure is maternity the only social power open to women. So she's saying that we have to think of women more than just matriarchs, because thinking of women as just matriarchs reinforces patriarchal structure, and that there's more social power open to women than just maternity. Interdependence between women is the way to freedom, which allows the I to be, not in order to be used, but in order to be creative. This is the difference between the passive be and the active being. Now, that's just a nonsense sentence that doesn't really say anything. That's just kind of saying we have to treat this with urgency. But what she's talking about at the end of the day is making sure she and her friends get better gigs at the conference. So these two paragraphs, it's a lofty way to make your careerism sound like something that's communal and for the greater good. So let's reread that with that in mind. The need and desire to nurture each other as women, meaning the need of you white women to nurture us black women and get us better gigs at this conference, is not only pathological but redemptive. If you help my career, you'll be redeeming yourself as white people. And it is within that knowledge that our real power is rediscovered. By you doing this, you're not losing power, you're actually tapping into your real power. You giving me a better gig at this conference is a win-win. It is this real connection which is so feared by a patriarchal world. So what you're saying there is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So it's gonna piss off the patriarchal world. So it's like you're actually fighting the good fight by giving me this gig. You're fighting the good fight against patriarchy. This real connection is feared by the patriarchs, and you hate them, don't you? Only within a patriarchal structure is maternity the only social power open to women. So it's like if you don't open this power to me, you're just reinforcing the patriarchal structure. Interdependence between women is the way to a freedom, but interdependency means the both of us working together, not me being your lackey, not me being one down in this conference. Like interdependence is you um, pushing my career along. This is the difference between the passive being and the active being. That's just like a nonsense new age woo thing that doesn't really add anything to it. But so far, are you guys following what I'm saying? That this is once you realize what this thing is about, you kind of realize that what Nathan was doing, the other thing, he's responding to something by a serious, selfless person who's trying to help people and change the system. And I'm saying that's the faulty premise that makes all the rest of the reasoning lead to a bad conclusion. And that reasoning is also a hand grenade being used to destroy an anthill. Once you realize that this is actually just a woman using um, communal language to Trojan horse striverism, it becomes a whole different article. Yeah, she's not like she's pissed, but she's giving them an easy out. Mm. Yeah, so going on, they didn't pick up where it left off. I think the chat just like froze. So I don't know. Are you guys still with me? Do you think this is a reach? Because I'm open to it. Maybe this is a reach. But I mean, I feel like this is. I put a link to this in the comments, so you guys are free to give me your own thoughts. But let's go on. Advocating the mere tolerance of difference between women is the grossest reformism. So she's saying that the grossest reformism is just merely tolerating having different women. What that means is you just putting me on this one ghettoized panel about black lesbians, and I'm the only other black woman there on top of that. And it's not even like the prime panel where all the superstars are. That is just you tolerating difference. You're just tokenizing me and giving me the bare minimum. But she's trying to make it seem like this is a fight for all women and something deeper. But that's like that's what you're saying, this is the grossest reformism. It is a total denial of the creative function of difference in our lives. Basically, you're not giving me enough based on my identity. Like I want my identity to get me more pull than what it's getting me. You know, I'm weaponizing my identity and it's not going as far as I would like it to go. So this creative function of difference is, you know, a type of special treatment that she wants even more of. Difference must be not merely tolerated, but seen as a fund of necessary polarities between which our creativity can spark like a dialectic. Now, this is just fancy language and it's also lofty language, but it also sounds selfless. And on its own, it doesn't sound bad, you know? Like, yeah, our differences, you know, this is like when people say our diversity is our strength and stuff like that. But when you look in the context of the bigger article, it's just about her bitching about one conference. Difference must not merely be tolerated, but be seen as a fun of necessary. So basically, working with me will also spark your creativity like a dialectic. Think of me as the other part of your dialectic. Like, you know, even though these people to me don't have any significant difference in opinion than their white female counterparts, they just they want the same things and think the same way. basically, but they like to posit themselves as some incredible counterbalance. The only difference is that they want more people like themselves in the jobs that the white women have. Only then does the necessity for interdependency become unthreatening. So she's saying that your problem right now is that you're seeing me as threatening, and that's why you're pigeonholing me. But once you realize that you need me for all the reasons that I gave, that giving me and my friends and people like me more cushy spots based on our identity, more it'll spark your creativity. It will piss off the patriarchs. It'll redeem you. um it'll help you rediscover your real power. This is all the stuff that's in the previous paragraphs. It's a path to real connection that the patriarchs fear. It's defies the patriarchal structure, because by keeping me in this uh, Earth Mother pigeonhole, you're reinforcing the patriarchal structure. Um, by recognizing those stuff, only then will necessity for interdependency, meaning only then does the idea of giving me more to do is going to become unthreatening to you once you accept these rationales that I gave you. Only within that acceptance of my premises, basically what she's saying, only within that interdependency of different strengths, acknowledged and equal, can the power to seek new ways of being in the world generate, as well as the courage and sustenance to act where there are no charters. And it's just nonsensical, lofty language to dress up a very, I think, kind of simple material request. So she's saying only by recognizing my strengths as a black lesbian woman, and seeing all these things I could do for you that I described, and accepting those premises, acknowledge an equal, treating me as an equal, only then can all this incredible stuff happen that she's saying. Like basically hiring her to do more and giving her a better showcase will create new ways of being in the world uh, to generate, and it'll also create courage and sustenance to act where there are no charters. And yeah, I think it's a very huge claim to say that giving her a better spot in this conference is going to do that. Who is she telling to put the tools down and stop dismantling? She's telling the white feminist to give her better gigs at the conference, and to not just put her in the one panel that's about black lesbians at the end of the conference. So the tools are basically, the people who are holding the tools are the people who run this NYU Institute for the Humanities conference that she's at. And the dismantling that they need to do is patriarchy, and the tools that they're using are white women speakers, white cis straight women speakers. So what she's saying is, to answer Manu, because maybe I haven't been clear enough, what she's saying is the master in this case are the people who run the conference. The tools are the white women speakers, and using white women speakers who are cis and straight is not going to dismantle the master, meaning patriarchy's house. You need to use other tools. And what's the other tool? Audre Lorde. So what Audre Lorde is saying is, hey, white ladies who run this conference, the tools that you're using, which is the white ladies you did invite to speak in the good spots, are not going to end patriarchy. What you need to do is use other tools, which is me and my friends, and use us in this conference, and then white patriarchy will be taken down. Oh yeah, yeah. This isn't to black people. This is written to white people. Yeah. So that's where you're making that mistake. Is that you're thinking this is for, most of her writing is not for black people, as far as I could tell. All of her writing is basically trying to shame white people to me into you know, liking and respecting her, I guess. But are you guys following me so far? Because I don't want to just keep going, and but you see what I'm saying, right? This is the whole thing, is the tools are white women who are getting the gigs that she wants. And so she's the reason why this thing makes no sense is because she's not really thinking, she's bullshitting. She's not really trying to get to any deeper truth or hit any universal value. She wants something and she's just trying to use sophistry and lofty language and poetry to trick people. Yeah, it's a self-centered argument, saying choose me. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, and this is something that they always do in diversity. That's why I use the phrase diversity is our greatest strength, because DEI people, diversity, equity, inclusion people, they love saying that, they love telling white people how, accepting diversity is going to lead to all these things. So yeah, no, she's doing both. Like B. Scott, you asked the question: is she BSing or making a plea for inclusion? What's the difference? She's using BS to make a plea for inclusion. Like she knows if she just says, "Hey, I deserve more. I'm so smart. I'm so special. I'm a superstar, and y'all shafted me. Y'all should have given me a better spot." She's just gonna look petty. So the BS is so this is the plea for inclusion, but the BS is what she uses to cover up that it's a plea for inclusion. She's just saying whatever sounds plausible to sell this and sound okay. Yeah, this kind of shows in the rest of the book. Yeah, so it's just her inclusion. You're right. She's just going for her own inclusion. Yeah, yeah, exactly. She's dressing her plea up in word salad, making her diversity statements for them, but she's also making it seem like a fight against patriarchy to hire her. And when did she write this? I don't know. It's a collection of essays, and the original book is from like the 80s, I believe. So yeah, the date is not here, but you know what? Somebody just Google it and then tell me because everyone's on the computer. So one of you guys can just Google it. Um, let me keep going. Within, she gets even deeper into the ridiculously pretentious word salad. This gets really pretentious. Within the interdependence of mutual that is non-dominant. Now, what does non-dominant mean? Not white. White people are the dominant frame. Straight people are the dominant frame. So she's throwing in my outsider status. Because remember, the name of this book is Sister Outsider. The outsider is your sister. Think about that. Sister Outsider is directed toward women, white women. And even the title is telling white women, hey, your true sister is the outsider, meaning me. Pick me. You know what I mean? Like, don't reframe how you think about the outsider. The outsider is your sister. So even the title, her whole project is to get white women to put her on in the feminist movement, to divorce herself from the larger black struggle, except to the degrees to which she can use her blackness to shame the white women into giving her stuff. And that's really all the book is about. But if it's so filled with sophistry and lofty language that if you go into it with any good faith, you're going to be fooled. You know what I mean? Like with age, I've just developed a natural skepticism to like everything. So I think, I read anything and I think anything's possible. I'm not gonna believe anything about this person just because people told me so, especially the type of people who praise her. So I was there, even though I was hoping for the best, I was prepared for the worst, but this was even worse than I ever expected. Like, I was really shocked at just the shallowness of the book, but just this essay in general. Oh, she's the total pioneer of this stuff. She wrote this decades ago. She is the blueprint, and it's amazing to me. She's the blueprint, and then, you know, Bell Hooks ran with it. But the two of them, Because everything that's in this is all they do now. When they beg for representation, when they try to shame white people into putting them on, when they woke wash their careerism, like everything that we talk about with blue checks. I'm glad you said that. That was the main thing I discovered when I read this was holy crap. These people aren't perverting her. They are the fullest manifestation of her. They are, you know how these people always say, I am my ancestors' greatest dreams? Like they are her greatest dreams. Like they're not perverting her at all. Should the panel have been more inclusive? I mean, depends on what you say, what you think. It depends. Why should they be included? Like, should it be more inclusive in terms of having more actual differences of opinion? Then yeah, hey, maybe sure. But what difference of opinion does she have? She doesn't say anything except, hey, I'm black and I'm lesbian. Like she thinks just the optics of her superficial identity markers is more inclusive. Like, for example, if I have a panel and it's full of black people, white people, Hispanic people, and stuff on MSNBC, but they're all like Biden shills, is that an inclusive panel? Now, what if it was an all black panel, but it had communists, capitalists, um, Marxist Leninists, Maoists, conservatives, all arguing, Democrats, Republicans, but it's all the same race. I say they're all the same gender. Say they're all women, right? Say it's all a bunch of black women, but they're all from different walks of life. Which one is, more diverse? Like I would argue that she doesn't really have a diversity of thought. Like I don't really see anything in her book that really shows her being much different than white women, outside of the fact that she just wants to weaponize her identity and white guilt to get more. Yeah. So, going on. Um, but this is a ridiculous sentence. Within the interdependence of mutual, that is, non-dominant differences, lies that security which enables us to descend into the chaos of knowledge and return with true visions of our future, along with a concomitant power to effect those changes which can bring that future into being. Difference is that raw and powerful connection from which our personal power is forged. So basically, my black lesbianism is the raw and powerful connection, non-dominant, because I'm not of the dominant society, from which our personal power is forged. Like me doing good is us doing good. Me doing good is cosmic ascendance into our highest self-actualization. It's just over the top. As women, we have been taught either to ignore our differences or to view them as cause for separation and suspicion rather than as forces for change. So, you giving me a better gig at this conference is a force for change. And it's your being taught to ignore our differences, like ignore, you know, um, and it's kind of weird that she's saying ignore because the earlier part of this essay is basically that because she's a black lesbian, she's being marginalized. So they're actually not ignoring it. What they're doing is they're being mindful of it and minimizing it. But the reason why there's no consistency in this article really is because all these fake sophistry things are not really what she's arguing about. So that's why it doesn't make sense. When someone's bullshitting, they self-contradict a lot because they're just making it up as they go along and just throwing out whatever is plausible. Liars are more consistent than bullshitters. There's a difference. Lying is when, and there's a book called On Bullshit by Harry Frankfurt that I highly recommend. It talks about this. I recommend it all the time. But lying is when a liar has to know the truth because lying is always saying the opposite of the truth. So if a liar loses track of what the truth is, they might accidentally say the truth. They can't just make things up as they go along with whatever sounds plausible because they have a specific goal. Um, they have to always say the opposite of the truth, and in a way, that makes a liar as much of an adherent or as loyal and mindful of the truth as a truth teller. Because even though they don't tell the truth, they're always checking in on the truth. They're always checking the facts. They're always doing whatever so that they can keep lying. A bullshitter doesn't care what the truth is. The bullshitter cares about impression management and selling themselves and getting to a goal. Like a bullshitter is like, let's say for example, a liar will be like, okay, I want this rocket to blow up. So I'm going to say everything I can to make this rocket blow up. As in, I'm going to lie about the fact that there's a bomb on it. I'm going to lie to get onto the rocket. I'm going to lie about what this bomb is and disguise it as a whatever. But if they want the rocket to blow up, they always have to be wary of the truth. Like, is this a bomb? Did I get the bomb on board? Did I set it up right? Did I set up the wires right? Is the detonator going to work? No matter what lies they're making, because they have a specific evidence-based goal to get to, they have to keep. Now, if I'm a bullshitter, let's say there's a bullshitter, I'm here to just pretend that I'm an expert on whether the rocket will blow up or not, but I actually have no qualifications. Basically, I just gotta say whatever is plausible to make myself sound smart, So I'll be like, yeah, it's not gonna blow up, And then when it blows up, I'll be like, well, actually, what happened is it wasn't gonna blow up, but then this happened, And like I'm just saying whatever. Sometimes with a bullshit, that's bullshitting. The bullshitter has no idea what's true or not. They just want to say whatever sounds plausible, and then as the facts on the ground change, they'll just keep changing or saying, "Oh, you misunderstood me. I didn't say it wasn't going to blow up. I said it was going to blow up." Or wait a minute, someone gave me bad data. It's his fault. He gave me, you know. And say, for example, it turns out someone did give you bad data, and that wasn't actually the reason why you couldn't predict that it was going to blow up. But you can use that. You might have accidentally stumbled onto the truth while you were bullshitting, but you just roll with it. But the difference between lying and bullshitting that makes it the worst is because both the liar and the truth teller have to keep track of the truth doesn't get lost. But the problem with bullshitting is that if you bullshit long enough, because nobody's keeping track of the truth, even the bullshitter loses track of the truth. Everyone. So if you look at a lot of stuff in here actually is kind of true. Like our differences actually do make us stronger. They do help us have a more diversity of viewpoints and thoughts. The best way to fight the patriarchy is for women of different things to get together. She's not lying, but she's bullshitting it in terms of none of this stuff, whether it's true or not, matters to her. She's just doing this to get a job. This whole thing is just a giant bullshitting session to get a job. Oh yeah, she's totally like, well, Roxane Gay is totally in the vein of this, but it's like each form gets more degraded. It's kind of like there was this movie or show where they kept cloning somebody, but each clone was more defective and degraded than the last, and they make clones of the clones, and that's kind of what happens. Like, I feel like Bell Hooks is not quite as good at this sophistry as Audre Lorde, but she's still very good. But Roxane Gay is like and even more like degraded. Like Bad Feminist is like this, but even more sillier and more superficial. Yeah, multiplicity. Yeah, that's exactly it. That's the one with Michael Keaton, right? Yeah, multiplicity. So yeah, basically, Bell Hooks and Roxane Gay are the multiplicity clones of Audre Lorde, and all these people are just basically um constantly. It's almost like resaving JPEGs. Yeah, she's guilting them into getting her way. So this is why those people, when I argue about this quote, they can't say anything to me because this thing is not really about what he pretends to be about. So of course, nothing in this because all of it was bullshit layered upon a plea for a better job. So of course they can't actually defend it because they were hoodwinked. It was just a bunch of word salad poetry and academic jargon to hide. So when the time comes and they have to, it's like that's taking a placebo. Someone's giving you a placebo that told you gave you super strength, and then you go and or someone's giving you fake karate moves, and you go to fight with someone and they kick your ass, and you don't know why. It's because what they were feeding you wasn't real substance and wasn't real. Yeah. Yes. So that's why there's no real discussion of the various type of tools you can have or how the master's house is constructed or why how you define whether you're using the master tools. The whole thing is basically using this abstraction called difference to mean me as a black lesbian and guilting white women into giving her a job. And that's why I'm saying Nathan's article just doesn't make sense in response to this, because he's responding to it would be like if you had those people on YouTube who are those fake martial arts gurus and they do things like poke people with a finger and then they fall down. Have you ever seen those guys, or the guy who just waves his hand and his students fall down? And most people, when they make videos about that, it's to laugh about how they're phony. But like what Nathan's doing is, if someone's saying, okay, this must be true, let me do a video on how to develop a proper martial arts to fight that martial arts. He goes, no, it's not what you do. You laugh at it and point out that it's bullshit, that it's fake, that it's a lie, whatever. So anyway, um those of us who stand outside the circle of this society's definition, meaning those of us who don't get the best jobs at this conference, the size definition of acceptable women, like basically I'm not acceptable enough for this conference based on where you put me in it. Those of us who have been forged in the crucibles of difference, and by saying forged in the crucible of difference, it makes it sound way more noble and warrior like than just saying I was born black and lesbian. Because that's what she's saying. She wants to be rewarded for just what she was born as, you know. But she phrases it as forged in the crucibles of difference. Like she earned it. She fought a war. Those of us who are poor, who are black, who are lesbians, who are older, it just happens that all these differences that are important just happen to be the differences that she has. Isn't that convenient? Know that survival is not an academic skill. It is learning how to take our differences and make them strengths. So basically, all these crucibles of difference, being poor, lesbian, black, and older, those are differences that are actually strengths. So if they're strengths, that means I should get a better job at this conference. I should be front and center. And then comes the next sentence. For the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. So now do you see everything that led to that? It doesn't even make sense in response, to what came before it. Like she just threw in this whole long thing that was making her being black, older, lesbian, and poor compared to the white women, um, into strengths that should get her a better gig at the conference, and she throws in because for the master's tools, like what's she talking about? She's not talking about anything bigger, you know? Yeah, it's really ridiculous when you see it in context. By the way, share this around with people. Link to this, share it in your social medias, text your friends, let people know. And I don't think I'm reaching here. Like to say that this sentence is just almost a non sequitur. It's such a reach, and it's so narrow what she's talking about. So the master's tools, meaning hiring white women to get all the good gigs and ghettoizing the black women lesbian women into these panels, when they should be getting better gigs, because the things that you look down on them for are actually strengths that redeem and self-actualize you, right? uh Doing those things is using the master's tools, and that will never dismantle patriarchy. Hire, Hiring white women instead of black women. So let's, now that we know what the master's tools are, let's restate this sentence, substituting the truth, like removing the bullshit and substituting the truth. So hiring white women instead of black older lesbians like me will never dismantle the patriarchy. We're gonna say patriarchy instead of master's house. It may allow us to temporarily beat the patriarchy at its own game, but hiring white women instead of older black gay lesbians like me will never enable us to bring about general change. And this fact is only threatening to those white women who still define the patriarchy as their only source of support. So she's basically saying the only people threatened by the hiring of older black poor lesbians is the white women who are hiring themselves. And it's not a lie, but it's still kind of bullshit to pretend this is about anything bigger. Poor women and women of color know that there is a difference between the daily manifestations of marital slavery and prostitutions, because it is our daughters who line 42nd Street. Now, this is kind of dirty pool. She's using the plight of poor women of color who are in real dire straits to boost her way to get a job. You know, at uh so she's like, if you don't give me these gigs, you know, think about those prostitutes on 42nd Street, you're basically supporting prostitutes on 42nd Street and exploitation. Like, I don't know why that even has to be brought up in response to her getting this gig. If white American feminist theory need not deal with the differences between us, and which means giving me more work, and the resulting differences in our oppressions, I'm more oppressed than you, so I should get a better job. Then how do you deal with the fact that the women who clean your houses and tend your children while you attend conferences on feminist theory are, for the most part, poor women and women of color? What is the theory behind racist feminism? Now, think about how crazy that sentence is. She's saying, if you don't give me a job because I'm a black older lesbian, and if you don't recognize me as more oppressed because I'm a black female lesbian, then what does it say about you letting black poor women clean your houses and tend your children? What does it say about you that you have black women cleaning your houses and tending your children while you're attending conferences on feminist theory that have nothing but white women speaking, right? That's gonna make you really, really, really racist. Basically, if you want to have a clean conscience about having black women be prostitutes on 42nd Street, if you want to have a clean white lady conscience about poor white women cleaning your house and tending your children, then you better hire more high level tokens like me at these lofty gigs, because then it's really going to prove you're racist. You need to hire me to offset the exploitation that you do to black women. Like, she didn't say you shouldn't hire these poor black women at to take care of your kids. He didn't say that you should give them a raise. Like, for example, if she really cared about these poor black women who are cleaning their houses and tending the children, she'll be arguing that you pay them more and give them health care. She doesn't say that. She says, if you want to help these poor black women who take care of your kids, no, if you want to help them, give me a job, which is what these people do all the time. Have you ever noticed when George Floyd happened, a bunch of these blue checks and actors started saying we need to have more representation. They were taking people like George Floyd getting shot and getting kneeled on and killed in the street, and then you had people like Michael B. Jordan giving speeches about at a Black Lives Matter rally about we need more black agents, more black movie studios and whatever. And it's like, why do these people keep taking the plight of poor people? It's like with the original Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter happened. All these poor black men died, and then the blue checks come out, and somehow it ends up with Oscars so white. More black people need to get Oscars, and more black people need to be hired in Hollywood and get more writing gigs and more diversity in movies. So somehow the answer to the problems of poor black people was giving rich black people something. Like Black Panther and Oscar So White and Moonlight winning an Oscar is somehow at some point became the answer to poor black people getting shot in the street by cops with no justice being happening. She's one of the originators of that. So, I mean, this sentence is so egregiously insulting. I have to just repeat it again. Like you have to absorb that. Basically, um, she likened herself to the prostitutes on 42nd Street, and she goes, "If white feminist theory does not deal with," I'm going to substitute what this really means instead of the words. If it doesn't deal with not giving black lesbian women like me and my friends jobs at conferences, and doesn't recognize the difference between the academics like me and the academics like the white women, then how do you deal with the fact that the women who clean your houses and tend your children while you attend conferences on these white conferences on feminist theory are for the most part poor women and women of color? Like, how are you going to be able to deal with the fact that you're exploiting poor black women if you don't hook up rich black women and set up tokens? So you know how basically people like Malcolm X and other people talk about black faces in high places, and how having a couple of black people doing good doesn't erase what's happening to poor people, and that they put up these mascots and tokens of success as a way to get off the hook for having to help poor people. What she's doing is actually recommending that. She's actually prescribing it. She's prescribing that you put black people in high places so that you can get away with continuing to exploit the poor people in your life. She's actually using these poor black women to leverage herself into a better gig. And I think that's really kind of scumbaggy. I'll be honest. Now, tell me something. Am I reaching? Because this is so obvious to me and crazy that I started gaslighting myself. I started thinking maybe I'm crazy. Like, is this really saying what I think it's saying? But I think it is. I really think this is what it's saying. It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. And also, like, what do lesbians have to do with um the women on 42nd Street? What do lesbians have to do with the women cleaning these white women's houses and tending to children? They're not on 42nd Street um doing that prostitution because they're gay, but maybe because they're gay and black. But a lot of these white gay kids don't have to do that. You know what I mean? Because that's something to fall back on. These black women aren't cleaning their houses because they're gay. So that's something else that I think is kind of disingenuous. That somehow you can solve the problems that affect black people because they're black by specifically giving black lesbians a job. You know what I mean? Like, so that's something I think is kind of silly. But in the world of possibility for us all, our personal visions help lay the groundwork for political action. So now she's doing what Bell Hooks does, where she's somehow tying in this to political action, when it's really just climerism and getting a job. The failure of academic feminists to recognize difference, meaning give me a job. Remember, every time she says recognizing difference, it means give me and my friends a job. The failure of academic feminists to recognize the importance of giving me a job as a crucial strength is a failure to reach beyond the first patriarchal lesson. In our world, divide and conquer must become divide and empower, but empower me and other academics, not the black women who clean your house and feed your kids. So now it ends back where it started. So after all that lofty digression, she goes back to the topic of the first paragraph. So this is in case you think I was reaching about this just being about her getting a job. Why weren't other women of color found to participate in this conference? Why were 2 phone calls to me considered a consultation? Am I the only possible source of names of black feminists? So basically, she was saying Google is free before it was Google is free. And she was talking about, I don't want to do your emotional labor before that became a catchphrase. Like, she was a pioneer of everything I hate about the modern social justice internet. Um, and although the black panelist paper ends on an important and powerful connection of love between women, what about interracial cooperation between feminists who don't love each other? So this paragraph is actually the honest part that gives away all the rest. The first paragraph and the closing gives the game away. She says a bunch of lofty, high-minded, fake radical, fake political, fake empowerment, fake new age, pseudo loving empowerment stuff in the middle, but the beginning and the end are really what's happening. So these are the real gripes, not all this producing difference and cosmic empowerment and all this stuff. It's, I wanted more black women at this conference. Uh, why was I only given 2 phone calls? You didn't recognize how great I was. Like, uh, that was a consultation. I should have been given more deference and time. I was treated like the help. It's a very narcissistic, self-aggrandizing gripe. That's all this is. Why was I the only one asked to produce names of black feminists? Like, you should have. Is that just what I am? I'm just the person that you call for to get black feminists. Like, I'm just there to be blackity black. Like, that's just what I'm here for. And she goes, why is it not more talk about interracial cooperation between feminists who don't love each other? What she means by that is, we want to be included more often in the projects that these white women do. So we want some of the glory of these white women. So basically, interracial cooperation between feminists who don't love each other means, in the workspace, we want to be included with what white women are doing more often and get some of those coins, get some of those plush gigs. Interracial cooperation between feminists who don't love each other means, the next conference, I want to be in the planning committee alongside the other white feminists. I don't want to just be the help. That's the interracial cooperation between feminists who don't love each other. In academic feminist circles, the answer to these questions is often, we do not know who to ask. But that is the same evasion of responsibility, the same cop out that keeps black women's art out of women's exhibitions. So again, it's about being excluded from plush gigs and career building opportunities. But also, she doesn't want the responsibility of actually having to do it. I want more black feminists to be here, but don't ask me to actually do the work. I just want to get a job. It's the whole thing where they advocate for stuff, but then we ask for some help. This happens all the time. Like, for example, there was like this woke social justice person talking about how Dave Chappelle's comedy is so bad, and I was like, well, who do you like? Show me some of these so funny, like, woke comedians that you like. And then, like, well, I'm not an expert on comedy. It's like, you're here telling people who not to like and who's not funny, but they don't want to do that. They just want to get themselves gigs. They don't want to actually have to do the work because they themselves don't even know what's out there. They don't really care because everything they do and consume is white themselves. You know, um, Black women's work out of our most feminist publications, except for the occasional special third world women's issue. So basically, after all talk about prostitutes and the help, she's talking about black women's art being kept out of exhibitions, how she's only invited to do, by feminist publications, to do the special token third world women's issue. She wants to be in the regular issues with the white women. She just doesn't want to be on the black panel. She doesn't just want to be in the black issue of the magazine. She wants to be in every issue. And black women's text off your reading list. Like, she wants to guilt these white women into reading her book, which worked. Now it's a staple of every book. Now you have to put these type of people's work, vibes feminist. You have to put vibes feminist work on every reading list now. And so this is all it is. She says it all here. She's like, I want uh my art to be in women's exhibitions. I want you know, my work to be in feminist publications, but not just in the blackity black issue. And I want my books to be recommended on the reading list. She goes, but as Adrienne Rich pointed out in a recent talk, which feminists have educated themselves about such an enormous amount over the past 10 years? How come you haven't also educated yourself about black women and the differences between us, white and black, when it is a key to our survival as movement? Women of today are still being called upon to stretch across the gap of male ignorance and to educated men as to our existence and needs. This is an old and primary tool of all oppressors to keep the oppressed occupied within the master's concerns. So she finally goes back to the masters and tools thing. Um, Now we hear that it is the task of women of color to educate white women. It's not my job to educate you. This is what I mean when I say she created everything. And it's really shocking to me. Like now it makes so much sense. She made the playbook for everything that kind of sucks in the discourse now to me. So she's making this call for arms, but she won't even meet them halfway and do the work. She just wants to get the job. So she's even absolving herself from the responsibility of giving. Like, let me ask you. Let me tell you something. Um, Q, formerly known as Andre Domise, has been putting a lot of work into diversifying spaces. And if you ask him, if he gets into one of these white spaces and he gets a foot in, when they ask him who else should we put on, he doesn't say it's not my job to educate you. He tries to put on everybody, which you should do. But I think it's just amazing that she gives this cosmic importance. She's like, you the white women are so bad. This is of cosmic importance, recognizing difference and self-empowerment and striking down the patriarchy. Wait, you want me to actually give you names? Oh, that's your job. So it's like they're so bad, but you're counting on them to self-correct. And despite all this difference that you say is so valuable and so informing, that difference is not enough for you to be able to generate names. So what's the point of you being black and lesbian then? And all this supposed wellspring of knowledge you can supply to the cause due to your differences, if no one's supposed to actually ask you about anything black and lesbian. You understand what I'm saying? Like, that difference only matters in allowing me to be an honorary white woman. But when it comes to actual substance, like, ask me to participate in blackity black stuff or as a source of blackity black stuff, now you're otherizing me. She's simultaneously saying that her status as an other should give her a privileged place in these white panels and white jobs. But when she gets there, she doesn't want to be reminded she's an other. She wants to be treated like an honorary white woman. And this is the problem with bullshitting. When you're just saying whatever sounds good and not telling the truth or lying, you contradict yourself all over the place. Let me see what you guys are saying. See, you're doing it again. You're giving it too much credit. See this question? What could be the master's tool that she's referring to in the title? The gap in the empathy? No, the master's tool is they didn't give her a job. See, like, this is what I mean. Like, you're clearly like a smart, well-intentioned guy, and you're doing that projection. You're projecting. Like, and I used to have this problem all the time. It was hard for me to just realize what a lot of people were. And don't think like this. This is not what it is. You're giving it too much credit because I get it. You're the kind of person, and I've seen you around, that you're a very intellectually honest, forthright person. You cannot imagine doing all this lofty language and invoking all these serious problems just to get yourself a job. So you're almost like in denial or rationalizing with that question. But you have to make peace. And I used to have this problem with Kenny. Kenny would just always call these people liars. And I would just be like, well, no, I don't want to go that far. And I would always try to kind of rationalize away that I kind of had to realize, and we said this last night, like, Kenny, you're right. These people are just kind of scumbags. You know what I mean? And I just didn't want to admit it to myself. But yeah, so this whole question, what could the master tool be referring? The gap in empathy for others, but that's like an absence of something. So it's still like, no, this is what it is. She wants to get more work and become an icon, and she's going to do it off the backs of actual oppressed black women too, and the black struggle to do it. But she wants to escape from blackness. So the master's tools is anything that keeps her from getting those gigs. Yeah, I see what you mean, but I wouldn't even give it the rhetorical. It doesn't deserve to even be entertained rhetorically. You know, like I see what you're saying now, but yeah, it's really scumbag shit. I'm not ashamed to say it's really scumbag shit. When once she was willing to tell these white women that hiring me is going to be absolution and indulgence for the way you exploit black women in your everyday life. And now, by giving me and these plush black women jobs, you can now stop thinking about the 42nd Street prostitute. And now you can exploit your poor black, uneducated female employee in peace. You know, this woman that I'm actually more privileged than, like, she's offering her striverism as an indulgence, a forgiveness of sins. She's offering it as their absolution. That's like me forgiving you for something you did to someone else. You know what I mean? Like, I'm forgiving you on their behalf. I can't do that. They have to forgive you. You know? Yeah. So it's. I mean, I don't know if I should even finish. Oh, it's almost finished. Let me just do it. But I think the point is already made. Um, Women of today are still being called upon to stretch across the gap of male ignorance and to educate men as to our existence and needs. This is an old and primary tool of all oppressors to keep the oppressed occupied within the master's concerns. Now we hear that it is the task of women of color to educate white women in the face of tremendous resistance. So, as to our existence, our differences, our relative roles, and our joint survival. But this is a diversion of energies and tragic repetition of racist patriarchal talk. Now, this rationalization, this bullshitting, this is what she's saying here. Like, you need a decoder ring for all this stuff. And not to toot my own horn, but one thing I am good at is I have a good bullshit detector. And the best way to develop your own bullshit detector is to support Champagne Sharks. So go to patreon.com/champagne sharks and become a subscriber, because I will tell you, if you listen to our podcast regularly, uh, we will sharpen your tools, and you have to recognize the difference that exists in patriarchal systems and realize that by subscribing to Champagne Sharks, you will absolve yourself of the way that you don't give any change to the bum on the street, the way that you don't help the poor black people in the homeless shelters. If you want a type of understanding of the important difference and the ways to produce reparations, subscribing to Champagne Sharks will help produce the reparations and the cosmic communion that we need as humans to once and for all overthrow the patriarchy and cause the redistribution of means that help, because I'm very oppressed, and you'll be erasing my oppression from so by all means go to patreon.com/champagne sharks, and yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. Yeah, see, yeah, I'm trying, what can I do? Yeah, I don't think I want to be that good at BSing. I think I mean, just doing that made my skin crawl. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. Yeah. Maybe I am a lesbian. You kill me. Uh, anyway, so basically, this is what this paragraph is saying, right? What it's saying is, I want to use my marginalized identities to guilt you into giving me a job, but I don't want to actually be expected to do any heavy lifting for Black and poor people. So what she's saying here is, um, you asking me to actually educate you, even though, let me ask you a question. If her job is not to educate you, then what has been the point of this whole essay? This whole essay has been her pretending to educate you to get a job. But why is it when she gets the job, you're not supposed to ask anything else out of her? So these people, their job is always to educate you. Their job is never to educate you, except when it's time to get something like a job. Then they'll educate you just fine, but they'll educate you only to the point that they get some kind of material gains from it. And yeah, so it's like, it's not the task of women of color to educate white women, but you're an educator, you're an academic, and you're talking at a conference. You're begging for the right to join a college conference in the education system where it's gonna be a bunch of white women, but you're also telling them it's not your job to educate white women. Like, make it make sense. If, like, I know some people who say things like, I don't want to educate white people. Like, someone, Vita is one of those people. But Vita's not trying to get in conferences like this. Vita doesn't like being in white spaces. Like, these people write whole books, essays, everything about educating white people, but somehow when it gets too tough, when they ask for data, when they ask for an actual plan, when they ask to actually help Black women who are not in their specific clique and class, suddenly, hey, it's not my job to educate you. So that's what this paragraph is. It just gives a lofty rationalization for why you should not ask her to explain or apply this master's tool paradigm outside of herself getting a job. So the same way all these people can never explain master's tool, besides, when I ask them questions about it, it's because the original essay by Audre Lorde herself was just bullshitting and using it for a very narrow purpose, to get herself a job. And she never had any plans to give it any broader applicability, because bullshitters don't really think about the uses and logic of the bullshit beyond the immediate benefit it gives them. And this is what was brilliant about this essay, she baked into the essay the very excuse she needed to not have to explain the tools further. Like, if you ask me to explain this any further than what it takes to get me a job, then you're being like the white racist who ask Black people to educate them about white people. You take this phrase and you figure it out yourself. And that's what these people do. When you argue with them, they sit around and they're like, the Black person told us that we can't ask them to educate them. So if we bug her to explain this more, we'll be like the racist patriarch that asked Black people to save him. So we're just gonna sit here and pontificate on what she actually meant and the broader application of it. And that's why when you try to point out these things, these people will be like, well, maybe she meant this. Well, maybe she might have actually meant this. And even the people trying to take it down, like Nathan Robinson, are kind of treating it with kid gloves, because they don't want to be the white person to ask the Black person to explain things, because asking Black people to explain things about the thing they supposedly care about is now somehow racist exploitation of emotional labor and whatever. Do we know how they responded to this? I mean, based on how well she's done and her legacy, I'm guessing they gave her the jobs. I mean, she is really, really, she is really, really iconic. You know what I mean? So, I mean, to me, it seems like it worked. And what she has done is become the blueprint for everybody. So, yeah, I mean, I think it worked. Um, Simone de Beauvoir once said, "It is in the knowledge of the genuine conditions of our lives that we must draw our strength to live and our reasons for acting." What the hell does that have to do with anything? You just put something lofty in there. Like people always do this. Like they just take a basic thought and they just put a fancy name behind it. Like you didn't need to bring up Simone de Beauvoir to say that. Like she said so many deeper things. Like you did not need to, but it gives it a kind of weight of authority uh, for the basicness. And it's also someone that white women know and recognize. Racism and homophobia are real conditions of all our lives in this place and time. I urge each one of us here to reach down into that deep place of knowledge inside herself and touch that terror and loathing of any difference that lives there and overcome it so that I can get more jobs. I added the last part in. See whose face it wears. Then the personal as the political can begin to illuminate all our choices about who gets hired at conferences. Basically, I added that part myself, but she's basically saying take a hard look at yourself and the racism in your heart and correct it by giving me a job. Then, in the most pretentious thing, she ends with Shakespeare. Prospero, you are the master of illusion. Lying is your trademark, and you have lied so much to me. Lied about the world, lied about me, that you have ended by imposing on me an image of myself, underdeveloped. You brand me inferior. That's the way you have forced me to see myself. I detest that image. What's more, it's a lie. But now I know you, you old cancer, and I know myself as well. Caliban in Aimé Césaire's A Tempest. And it's a beautiful passage, but she's applying it in a very superficial, self aggrandizing way. She's saying, what the passage is saying is, white women, I'm going to beat you up because you like white guilt. You are the masters of illusion. You're liars, and you've lied so much. You've lied about the world. You lied about me. And you have presented an inferior image of myself and made me see myself that way. But I detest my image and I'm being empowered. She's making her fighting for better gigs at this thing into a redemption of the black image in the face of white supremacy. She's making it a radical act of self redefinition and challenging the white women reading this. You don't want to be that person that is being indicted here. Give me these jobs. You know, do you want to be the person being indicted by this passage? So the person who asked 1984, the year is here. The book was 1984, collection of essays, but it might be actually older when it was written because all those essays weren't written just for the book; they were published earlier. So that's that. We're done. I'm just gonna read a couple of. I'm just gonna read a couple of comments because I haven't been reading, but um, yeah, he did. He totally did. In the introduction to Settlers, he talks about it, and he talks about people like that, and it's a very important part of the book that I think. You know, it's just that that's bad writing. It's like some shit when I was trying to stretch something to 20 pages. Yes, totally. Yeah, give her the job so she can shut up real activists. And that's what I'm saying. Like we lost. When it's been the most powerful paradigm, when actual people I respect keep quoting this lady, this is what I'm saying. Like white people won. They just have not told us. They just did not tell us we won. Like when you actually research the heroes that we're given these days, they're all chosen by white people, and they're all the most selfish climbers that you can ever imagine. And I used to think that the modern people we had were perversions of these older people. But when I read Sister Outsider a couple months ago, and when I actually started listening to Bell Hooks speeches when she died, I was like, holy crap, these people, this is like a cancer that has metastasized. And a lot of times, by the time you notice the symptoms of a cancer in a very significant way, a lot of times it's too late. And that's kind of what has happened here. What we are experiencing is a metastasization. But this cancer has been building for like a while. You know what I mean? Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, and this is a great thing. That video yesterday was the worst thing I've seen since the Nike video, but it also makes sense because you start realizing the Nike video is not a trivialization of something serious and academic. The serious academic thing was already trivialized, and the whole reason the corporation was so able to co-opt it was because it was pre-trivialized by the original academics themselves. Yeah, and who are we supposed to ask what the major thinkers are? Not her, but she will probably name a couple of her friends and stop there. But she doesn't want to research beyond that. But also, she probably doesn't really know a lot of other black feminists. I wouldn't be surprised because all the partners were white. I think all her social circles were white, basically. So I wouldn't be surprised if she straight up didn't actually even know that many. Like one big difference with the modern version of these people, they do actually form a coalition and they always signal boost each other and name drop each other. So they will actually tell you, these new people, who to hire and read. So in a weird way, they've almost created a tribal loyalty that she couldn't even do. Yeah, so that's it. I'm done. Support the show. Hit the super chat if you enjoyed the stream. If you super chatted, I usually shout you out, but because I was reading the essay, I might have seen um some things. If anybody donated and I didn't shout you out, oh, someone named Charles donated a super sticker. Thank you, Charles. But yeah, what's going on, man? I mean, share this show. Share the show with your favorite pro Audre Lorde people. Anytime you see on Twitter, I know it's long, but there's no way to make this short. Anytime you're on Twitter, you see someone give this quote, share it with people because I kind of want this to get out more. I just think it's amazing. And the most amazing part is the part where hiring me will absolve you of how you treat your maids and give you license to continue to ignore the 42nd Street prostitute. Like helping me is a way to absolve yourself of that guilt and prove you're not racist. That's genius and Machiavellian, but it's so scumbaggy. And if anybody thought that it was a reach, by all means, let me know that too. Like, comment, share, subscribe. All that is free. Uh, you can help support us at PayPal, champagnesharks@gmail.com. Venmo or Cash App us at Champagne Sharks. Subscribe to the podcast. And even if you're not subscribed, just listen to the podcast. Search Champagne Sharks anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Do that. And by supporting us, you help us with a lot of stuff like this new camera that we have that I think is super sharp. You see the 90-degree view? We reinvest your support into the show. So this new camera I got, which I think makes things look way better, you guys pay for it, and I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you guys that support us. But the other thing I want to do next, I want to hire a video editor so that we can do actual professional video essays that are pre-recorded with music, sound effects, kind of things that people like ContraPoints do. And we want like a house one that we don't pay per gig. We just pay them a flat rate every month, and we just start doing actual professional edited video essays, not just stream of consciousness. So that's something that I would really appreciate you guys support on, and love you guys, appreciate you guys. Take care and be good.